If the key wasn't in the ignition, there was foul play. Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So there are two ways to address that. If the key was in the ignition, it was an accident. Using the same reasoning, if the key isn't in the ignition, there was foul play, right? It seems pretty straightforward until one makes a pretty simple check. Did Kylie's Honda CR-V use a key plus ignition? I have an automatic vehicle that doesn't. It uses a push button to start. And it turns out a 2013 Honda can be turned on simply using the key fob, also known as remote start. I'll put a link to that demonstration in the description. Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. Thanks to the hundreds of you who have subscribed over the last few days. And let's get started. So a few days ago, Adventures with Purpose's Doug Bishop appeared in a live and was asked which way was the front of the vehicle pointed. Doug responded, "I believe the front was pointed out towards the lake." But imagine if it wasn't. Imagine if he said, "I think the vehicle was pointed, the nose was pointed towards land," right? Towards the point that the vehicle entered the reservoir. I'm saying, imagine if he said that. Would that mean there was foul play? You might say, definitely. Well, I think it would shift the needle, but it's reductionist to reduce this entire case to one variable, and it feels like people are constantly doing that. Even if the vehicle did point the quote-unquote wrong way, who's to say that Kylie didn't turn at the last moment and the momentum caused the vehicle to swing about? Bear in mind, it hits the water, it's already turning slightly, and then it sort of completes that turn slowly as it is filling up with water, right? There's a momentum that continues in the water after it hits the water. Now, of course, if she's not turning and the vehicle is going straight, it's going to continue going straight. Also, the fact that the vehicle is upside down is neither here nor there. I don't think you can say it's suspicious that it's upside down, and I don't think you can say it's not suspicious that it's upside down. Doug's observation on Duty Run Live, I'll also put a link to that in the description, that the vehicle's windows ought to have been sealed, raises, I think, an interesting thought. I do think, in a way, the cops botched the salvage of the vehicle in the sense that they damaged it. They damaged evidence. So, I mean, it makes you kind of think, when you look at the footage, you think, wow, did Kylie break the window, or did she break the driver's side window, and did she break the mirror, or who broke the mirror? All of that is as a result of them botching the salvage. So one thing to look at in the future is the tricky question on how do you recover a relatively intact vehicle that's just gone underwater without breaking stuff. And I think if you think about how easy it was to damage Kylie's vehicle in salvaging it, the fact that it was intact when it was found, I think tells you it didn't go into the reservoir at an extremely high speed. It went in at a relatively low speed. At 31 minutes 45 seconds in Duty Ron's interview with Doug Bishop, thanks for that timestamp, Stephanie, Ed Wallace, a retired CSI detective, asks Doug, he says, quote, "So that leads to a whole lot of forensic questions. Did you guys note anything in terms of position of the gear shift? Was this a key start engine?" End quote. Now, the part that confuses me a little bit about that is, I don't know whether the Adventures with Purpose had authority to, permission basically, to enter the vehicle and sort of poke around, right? It's basically a crime scene. They're not cops. I think they had permission to find the vehicle, but I don't think they had permission to sort of touch it and interfere with it, which is why he says to his diver, don't remove the license plate like we normally do, right? Also, it's the reason why they immediately hand the vehicle over to other authorities in terms of the salvage, because it's part of an active investigation. Anyway, Doug said he couldn't answer the particulars of that question because it's part of an ongoing investigation. A little strange because Jared, another AWP crew member, speculated that he thought the vehicle was in neutral. So are you allowed to say what gear it is in, or do you not know? I'm not sure if AWP would have known the gear was, which it was one way or the other, with a vehicle upside down and off, right? I don't know if I agree with him that stuff inside the vehicle should be removed in an active investigation type scenario. Compared to a normal crime scene, obviously this is an underwater crime scene, and you need to move the vehicle, you need to take it out. But I'm not sure if I agree that you should go into the vehicle and take stuff out. I think if you can photograph the vehicle accurately, and I mean, for that you need time, you need lighting, you need good cameras, then maybe you can retrieve some of that stuff out of the vehicle. Maybe you can also retrieve certain things, like her phone. You can document where it is and then retrieve it. You can document where the keys are if you see them, and then retrieve them. Another comment was made that the rear driver's side window being open was done to make the vehicle sink more quickly. Again, it's an argument pushing the foul play narrative. Well, why would you push down one window intentionally but break the other? Well, I suppose you could say not break the other. Or, if the idea was to sink the vehicle as fast as possible, why would you only roll down one window and only 2/3 of the way? Why not all the way? Doug Bishop also confirmed what I thought was obvious, but it's good to get confirmation from someone who was there. That's in terms of the water, the currents. He said the current in the reservoir wasn't a factor. So the phone or keys couldn't have swum off. Do you see why it's important to think about something in both ways rather than pushing along a particular bias? And that brings us to this idea, why are we always so reductionist in our thinking? I think the reason is actually our culture. We in an industrial complex where we find ourselves, we're always thinking about efficiency and effectiveness. Phones are coming out that are quicker and faster and have more memory. Computers, vehicles as well. When we drive our vehicles, we're thinking about fuel economy. We are aware of it when we buy things during an inflationary or recessionary period. How do we keep costs down? Well, how do we keep thinking time, thought processing down, right? If you think about a computer trying to solve a problem as quickly as possible, develop a vaccine as quickly as possible, or how do we problem solve as quickly as possible? And I just think we're not very good. We're not very intuitive at thin slicing. We think we are, which makes us even worse. I think you only learn to be intuitive once you've done the hard yards of thinking through a lot of true crime cases. And when you've done all of that thinking, even if you've done all of that thinking, and I've written tons of books, true crime books, you still have to challenge yourself to think. You still have to wait a moment and go, I'm not going to project myself into this case. I'm rather going to try and be intuitive. And that's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to put yourself in the mind of a teenager or put yourself in the mind of an uneducated abductor. Hard on his luck abductor, someone who's nothing like you. You've got to figure out who they are, what their jobs are, what their psychology is, what the dynamics are. You've got to figure out a totally different identity and then sort of feel your way around. That takes time. It's much easier to project yourself onto the situation, but that's totally artificial. You are not that person. So putting yourself in the shoes of either the victim or the perpetrator, and preferably both, that's one of the keys to figuring out one of the hardest aspects in true crime, which is the identity of these people. And when you know the identity of someone, you know their reality. You've got a better grasp of the reality. So think about it. Not pushing yourself onto another person in true crime is also, I think, good practice for real life. It allows us to let the other person speak and teaches us listening skills. If more of us listen, just that, and more of us, more of what is communicated is heard and understood both ways, I think that makes for better relationships, don't you? And better relationships mean healthier communities, and healthier communities mean nicer societies and a happier world. Instead of all of us shouting over one another and pushing ourselves onto a particular story, how about listening to the story? How about getting the information? How about having that scout mindset? Can you see how listening can actually be a great step to creating a better world? We become nicer to other people become nicer to us, and also reality then speaks to us better than any man. Does that make sense? So I'm not going to take it further than that. If you're enjoying this content, if you're appreciating it, be sure to hit the thanks button, and I'll see you guys next time.